First, Josh.
Good afternoon, everybody. We just hit our heads. Father God, we thank you today for your grace and your mercy. We thank you for traveling mercies that have brought so many people here today as we continue to endeavor for the good of the Rappahannock River and our region. We pray that you would give us the wisdom and the information on how to do better. We thank you and your grace and your mercy. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Debbie?
Yes, we could all pledge allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nomination on the floor.
Mr. Chairman, we have a forum in person in the room.
All righty, first up, we'll do welcome and introductions, and we'll start with Debbie again, so welcome us to Rappahannock County.
Thank you. Thank you very much for traveling a long way for some of you. Rappahannock County, as you have probably noticed, is very rural, and we like to keep it that way. We like our tourism and our agriculture and our wineries. And even though we needed the rain desperately, I know it's not great for the wineries today, but wanted to welcome you. You probably noticed we don't have stoplights. We aren't really friendly with cell towers either, so your cell service may work or may not. T-Mobile, I think, is the best one we have out here at the moment, and that's because a lot of their towers are in silos. You wouldn't even notice them out there. But we have about 7,400 people, and if you are in good shape and could walk to the top of Chester Gap, which is right over there, some would say that's where the headwaters of the Rappahannock is. Thank you very much for being here. We did bring, this is our Business of the Rappahannock brochure. If you haven't been here, we do have a lot to offer, and it's a great weekend getaway or weekday hike. And we've got great restaurants and vineyards. So thank you very much.
Debbie, thank you. We'll just go around and introduce ourselves.
Kathy Bender, King George County.
Tom O'Halloran, Woody Henson, Westmoreland County Board Supervisor.
John Durlock, City of Fredericksburg.
Joseph Steps, Hanover, Carolina, Soil and Water Conservation District. Deontay Diggs, Stafford County Board of Supervisors.
Mike Broadus, Fauquier County Board of Supervisors.
Delegate Joshua Cole, representing the 65th House District, that's the City of Fredericksburg, South Stafford County, and Northern Spotsylvania County.
Kevin Marshall, Spotsylvania County Board Supervisor.
Jillian Paul staff.
Elvin James, staff.
Jason Bellows, Lancaster County.
Do you want to do the room and then we'll do online?
Sure, we'll start over here.
John Giese, Virginia Department of Environmental Quality.
Jeremy Hall, I'm Virginia Department of Health, Office of Drinking Water.
Hi, Dwayne, Roadcap, the Office of Drinking Water. Tim Clemons, Rapidan Service.
Amanda McCullen, Culpeper Soil and Water.
James Carr, I'm the Health District Director for Rappahannock, Rapidan.
Deirdre Clark, Marshall Soil and Water Conservation District.
Michelle Edwards, Rappahannock Rapidan Regional Commission.
Chip World, for George Washington Regional Commission.
Mary Hughes, Sullivan County Utilities.
Brian Hoffman, the President of Rappahannock.
Kevin McLean, Chesapeake Bay Program Manager with DEQ. Terry Lasher, Assistant State Forester, Department of Forestry.
Gary Curry, County Administrator, Rappahannock County.
And Paul Milday, representing the 64th, the best part of Stafford in the House to go.
And online, you want to do a roll call for online?
Yeah, we'll let Jillian do that so she can read all the names.
David Lee.
Okay.
Yes, hi, everybody. David Lee, Culpeper County Board of Supervisors. Thank you.
Brian Nickel.
Hello, Brian Nickel, Orange County Board of Supervisors, District 5.
Tracy Gaskins.
Yes, Trace Gaskins for Rapidan Service Authority.
Don McGowan.
Don McCowan with Piedmont Environmental Council.
Craig Francis.
Craig Bank Francis is staff for Delegate Phil Scott.
Yeah, sorry, he's on. We share
Sorry,
an office. He just had to step away. Yeah, Craig Francis, Delegate Philip Scott. My apologies for having to step away for a second.
Brianna Heath.
Hi, Brianna Heath, the environmental planner for the Northern Neck Plain District Commission.
James Mannix.
James Mannix on behalf of Senator Bryce Reeves.
Cheyenne Courtney.
Cheyenne Courtney, I'm with George Washington Regional Commission. I'm the Office Coordinator, Program Coordinator, assisting with the environmental program.
Kate Gibson.
Kate Gibson, Deputy Director with the George Washington Regional Commission.
And I see Delegate Hodges.
Hello, Keith Hodges, Delegate for the 68th District in the House of Delegates.
Am I missing anyone?
Yes, sorry. Lisa Mountcastle. I'm a proxy for Senator Richard Stewart, and my iPad needs to correct my name.
No problem.
All right, thanks again and welcome everybody. Welcome everybody online and here present on this rainy afternoon. I'd like to give a brief moment to Mrs. Kelly Knight to welcome us to.
I don't see Kelly here. She must be busy pouring wine in the other room.
I don't blame her. Then we'll move on. Review and approval of agenda.
Mr. Chairman, we have a request. We need to move agenda item 8 from the forestry up to will be agenda item 6 and the presentation by Public Health doing Roadcap.
With no objection to that, I'll ask for approval, motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? All right, thank you. Let's see, next up, we welcome our new representation on the Soil and Water Conservation Districts.
I'll start this off and then I'm going to hand it off to Tom, and then we're going to bring it back here. Tom is retiring. As hard as that, this will be his last meeting. The Code of Virginia requires that the soil water conservation districts of the basin, of which there are 7, are represented on the commission, and they're selected by representatives of the 7 districts. The Department of Conservation and Recreation called the district directors and chairs of their boards together, and they went through a discussion process to select who would be the representative and alternate. Joe Stepp was the unanimous recommendation to move from alternate to member. And then an interesting discussion occurred over the alternate. And with that, I'm going to let Tom, I'm going to dump this in your lap. I'm going to let you explain what happened.
That's not that big, what are you going on? What actually came up is when Joe was, he was a no-brainer for the set of it. Been on it a number of times, been on it as long as I've been on it. As a backup, and he's quite familiar with conservation practices and farmers challenges in the district that I've been facing. But when it came to selecting an alternate, which I didn't feel a little bit, they wound up with 2 people. We didn't have a tie-breaking vote, and it turned out 2 alternates that were chosen. Was one from the upper basin, one from the lower basin. And I was just wondering if the commission would allow for the 2 alternates for soil and water districts to help Joe bring forth the challenges and focus of agriculture producing oil in the. And if that's the case, if you would, then Lynn Graves from the upper basin, some of you may know him, he's in the agribusiness county, as well as he's been the president of the Soil and Water Association. And Aaron Rowland, who is the lower basin, he's an Northern, and totally different focus, but it's something that I think everybody needs to understand, because it's not the same. Agriculture is not the same. We'll tell you, he and I have different ideas about what's needed. But we both know that it needs to be taken care of. So I would ask you, the commission to approve the, two alternates instead of two.
Mr. Chairman, that leads to a bylaws discussion that the chairman and I had. And there are two sections of the bylaws that are pertinent. So I proceed. Under membership, 2-1B says, "One member of the commission shall be a representative of the soil and water conservation districts found wholly or partially within the Rappahannock River Basin as defined in the code. The member and alternate shall be selected from the elected members of the basin's districts in a manner agreed upon by the districts." The chairman and I talked about, and you could say, because it says alternate, it's one, but you could also say it's in a manner agreed to by the representatives of the districts. So which is it? Well, we have another section, 4-1.2, which grants to the chair the power to rule on all procedural questions, subject to an overrule by the commission by 2/3 vote. So it's, what say you, sir?
So my rule is that, or my ruling is that I didn't think it, after the discussion, that it wouldn't hurt to have additional alternates. You only get the one vote, so I thought the part of the code that said that y'all get to decide was supersedes the single description of alternate as listed in the bylaws. So I would suggest that we accept the two nominees as the alternates, and then perhaps maybe tidy up the bylaws in the future to just include alternates instead of just alternate. So that was my ruling.
Okay, that settles it. Both Lynn Graves and Aaron Rowland will, after this meeting, that takes effect after this meeting, will serve as alternate, but of course, remembering alternate is an alternate. The member has the vote, and one of the alternates gets the vote if the member isn't here. And that's the same way Stafford chooses to have a member and an alternate. Some localities do that, some do not. It's their choice. So,
without any objection to that, then that's the way we will proceed. Sounds like everyone's okay with that.
I thank you, because like I say, it would help him bring forth challenges and focus of agricultural producers in the 7 districts up and down the basin.
Well, just as every year we have seasons, so does the seasons of service. So as you conclude your service here on this board, we wish you well. And thank you for many years of service that you provided to not only this commission, but to the health and vitality of the Rappahannock River Basin region. So thank you for that service, and I'd like to give you a little token of appreciation. So greatly acknowledge the contributions and commitment of Thomas O'Halloran as a member of the Rappahannock River Basin Commission from 2011 to 2024. Today. Thank you again. Thank you for your service. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for stepping up. We look forward to continue working with you in your new role.
I need 2 alternates, only y'all help me.
Well, they said 2 is better than 1 sometimes, I guess, right? Next up, approval of the consent agenda. I'd like to have a motion to approve the consent agenda. It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Public comment. Is there anybody present in the room who would like to make public comment? Seeing none, is there anybody online that would like to make public comment? Since there's nobody to make public comment, we will close the public comment and move on to our first report of the Rappahannock, Rapidan River Water Advisory. Dwayne.
First, like me,
if you don't mind, you all right with that voting?
Yeah, fine.
All right, we're gonna bring up your your presentation.
So wait for you to change the slide.
Yes.
He has lots of backup today. Backup from the health department, backup from Rappahannock Service Authority, and backup from DEQ. If somebody poses a question that Dwayne can't answer.
I don't know if you can have that many answers.
There's a little bit of a delay. Well, it's actually on mine.
Thanks for having me here. And Elvin said, I'm Dwayne Roadcap, I'm the director for the Office of Drinking Water. And we've got Tim Clemons, who's managing director for the Rapidan Service Authority. We've got John Giese here with the Department of Environmental Quality. We've got the local health district represented by the health director, Dr. James Carr. And I'm here to give you a little bit of a story that happened with the at the Rapidan Service Authority. So if you can change the slide, please. And the story starts on August the 21st. The RSA, and call them RSA, Rapidan Service Authority. They serve about 13,000 customers. They have a little over 5,250 service connections. And in the afternoon on August the 21st, customers started reporting that they had an objectionable odor in the water and it smelled like WD-40. Others were describing it as coming from a mechanic shop or gasoline or diesel. That's a really concerning type of odor if you're getting it in your drinking water. So the service authority folks were able to say, yeah, that's odor. We don't get it in that treatment plant as well. So the service authority shut down the treatment plant and contacted the health department, DEQ. We had teams go out there on August the 21st in the afternoon, trying to assess and determine what might be causing the odor and what's associated with it. As you move through the storyline, I'm going to give you some more details. The story sort of goes a few days later on the 24th. We changed the do not use advisory that started on the 21st to a do not drink. And I'll talk about what that means and how that played out. And then on the 27th, we lifted the advisory in its entirety as the odor had gone out of the water treatment plant and it had sufficiently dissipated in the customer service lines to the point where we were comfortable lifting the advisory. And the advice to the citizens at that time is if you smell the odor, turn on your faucets and flush in accordance with how RSA, the Rapidan Service Authority, was offering that up. And I keep chewing up there. Use that?
No, that's the microphone. Yeah.
It works.
So, John, watch what you say.
So just give you a little bit of background, as I mentioned, it's 13,000 people that are served by the water treatment plant. It has about a capacity of 1.2 million gallons per day. As I mentioned, Tim Clemons is here to give you some more details than I am. They have different kinds of treatment feeds at the treatment plants. They do chlorine, they do fluoride. There's some caustic soda that's involved. The turbidity, which is sort of a measure of how clear how much suspended solids you might have in the drinking water coming out of the plant, is very low. And they've got filters at the plant and they backwash them, and that's kind of where you see that. So it's very typical for what you might see for a water treatment plant operation. It just happens to be at about 1.2 million gallons per day. So next slide, please. To give you some aspects about the water that's entering the water treatment plant, we call that source water. You can see that the pH is, again, pretty typical, normal. The NTUs is a reflection of how clear the water is, and anything under 10 tells you that you've got a pretty good source water. So on average, They've got really good source water. You'll see some high numbers where you get rain events and runoff and things like that. But everything here is relatively what you would expect with a surface water treatment plant. Next slide, please. I thought I would also, in the story, tell you a little bit about the Virginia Department of Health. So as a state agency, we regulate public water systems in Virginia. To be a public water system, you have to serve at least 25 people 60 days out of the year. And so we have very small to very large population centers in Northern Virginia, Richmond, Newport News, Norfolk, Virginia Beach. Those areas we regulate very large, but we also regulate very small. If you're in a rural community and you've got a well associated with a restaurant or campground or a marina or a nursing home or something like that, we regulate that too. So we regulate as a federal program. So the Safe Drinking Water Act on the federal level means that no matter which state or territory you go to, there's a baseline of federal rules that apply to the drinking water program. And here in Virginia, we have primacy. So the US EPA provides us with resources and funding, and we have a staff that help implement those federal rules. The state can have more stringent requirements, but has to have at least what the federal rule requirements are. And so we issue policies, procedures, we do compliance enforcement, we issue permits, we do technical assistance. We have an emergency preparedness unit. We give out loans and grants for infrastructure funding. So those are the kind of roles that you'll typically see with the Virginia Department of Health. Next slide, please. With our sister agency, with the Department of Environment and Quality, they deal on the pollution side. And so they have expertise in pollution incident investigations. They manage the air, water, and waste programs included in that program area. They also have delegated authority from US EPA. It's a little bit different than primacy, but they have delegated authority on the national level with their programs. And they do a lot of the same things that the Virginia Department of Health does with regulating, except they're regulating the dischargers and the pollution side of it, whereas drinking water is doing the drinking water stuff. Next slide, please. The service authority is the permittee of the health department. And so their job is to provide the technical, managerial, and financial oversight of the water authority and to do the day-to-day operations of the water treatment business. So they are handling the billing, the asset management, the capital improvements, the sampling, the reporting, all of those things that are regulated activities, they're doing that. And I'll just point that down here. Our regulations require the service authority to be a responsive and effective owner and to manage the water system in a very responsible way. Next slide. So with understanding the roles and sort of setting the stage, I had mentioned that on the 21st, we got this very concerning odor. We immediately started an incident command system, and we had a bunch of different agencies that started to get involved in helping to help us figure it out, because there was no immediate identified source as to why that odor might be associated with drinking water. So it was very confusing. We tried in conjunction and in coordination with the service authority, we were issuing some press releases. Our communication team also created an incident webpage where we were trying to populate that on a daily basis to try and push out information about what's going on. Obviously, the consumers, trying to reach 13,000 customers with a do not use advisory, it can be a mounting task. And so there was a lot of effort to try and get the word out about the do not use. And if you turned on your faucet in places, you would have had very concerning, troubling odor. So it would have hit you immediately that there's something going on here. Next slide, please. So this is just a reflection of how we set up incident command on something like this. There's a unified command that we create with different people involved in that. We've got planning and different areas that are in the coordination of this to try and organize the response. We have a communication team, as you can see there. And then we also were including in the epidemiology team from the local health district. We were jumping in our toxicology team from the health department. We were reaching out to the US EPA on Region 3 for some help and some advice on what might be going on here because we couldn't figure out what was going on, what was causing the odor. Next slide. Thank you. So one of the things that we did with the do not use is there was a strong local push at the county level to have water filling stations and providing bottled water. Virginia Department of Emergency Management worked with local emergency coordinators. I think this turned out to be one of the success stories of the event because there was a lot of local coordination and effort to reach out to the community and make sure that people had access to drinking water and bottled water, especially in those first few days where it was a do not use advisory. We were saying that it was okay to flush your toilets, but we didn't want to have any skin contact or any consumption of the water. Next slide. We were taking a lot of sampling because we're trying to figure out what it is. And I'll say on the afternoon of the 21st, we had field investigators that were reporting some conflicting information. There was one report that came back from some field level that said there might be some benzene or toluene in the water, a hydrocarbon-based kind of thing. Others were coming back and saying our field equipment's not detecting anything. But again, it was concerning enough that we needed to put in a do not use. In total, we had 98 total samples. It was over 2,300 different analytes that were tested, trying to identify what was going on with water, and that's through the entire event. So there was thousands of dollars that was spent on trying to figure out what this might be. And so this is just a small portion to give you an idea of people running around trying to sample and figure out what was going on. Next slide, please. This is a little thing on the incident page that we had tabs and saying, here's where we are today. And we had different types of communication on different tabs. So you could look in and see on a daily basis what was actually happening to try and figure this out and where we were in the investigation so that you didn't have to necessarily wait on press releases and other things. And so at least once a day, sometimes multiple times a day, this was being updated with new information. Next slide, please. This gets into the first few days where we're going from the do not use to the do not drink. And here, what I'll say is we weren't getting any detections for volatile organic compounds or semi-volatile organic compounds. And there was significant sampling going on. And I highlight this top because what you're going to hear is we finally think we figured out what caused the odor. And it happened to be a catastrophic pump failure at the water intake at the water treatment plant. So I'm sort of giving you the final thing here. But when we're early in this investigation, we don't know that. We're trying to figure that out. And so when our investigators and people were out there trying to figure out what's going on one hand, you could think of it relatively simply. Either the cause of this odor came from the Rapidan River and it entered into the water treatment plant from the intake at the river, or it happened at the water treatment plant. And so DEQ, along with local law enforcement, state enforcement, they were doing riverbank walks. There was watercraft up and down the river. There were some dischargers upslope that people were looking at what kind of things they discharged. And there was a significant effort. We didn't find any sheens. There were no impacts to aquatic life. There was no impacts to any kind of wildlife that could be found. And to have the kind of impact through the distribution system that would affect 13,000 people, sort of the initial assessment was it had to be a discharge near the intake that you would presume would be that you could readily observe, which we weren't seeing, or it had to be something that was upslope that would have had to have been a rather significant kind of discharge of some sort, and we weren't finding that or seeing that. We were looking at weather patterns. Was it runoff from a recent rain event? There were thunderstorms during the time period. We looked at stormwater drains. We looked at different businesses that were around trying to just sort of figure this out. And ultimately, we came to the determination we could not find anything that would have moved along the river that would have entered the water treatment plant based on everything that we were looking. We had lots of activity and energy on that particular event. So ultimately, then when you get into the water treatment plant, then you're saying, okay, well, maybe it could be an equipment failure, which is what it ultimately ended up being, from where we are today. Or it could be associated perhaps with an algal bloom or perhaps some bacteria. So we were looking at slime and sludge that might have been forming on some of the sedimentation basins. We were doing some tests for algal and bacterial sampling. We weren't finding any of that. And so we were still very stumped as to why the odor was there, because we weren't finding it on the Rapidan River and we weren't finding anything associated with it at the water treatment plant. Next slide, please. So on the 24th, we were doing daily inspections at this point at the water treatment plant, and the odor was dissipating each day. So the more we were doing sampling, trying to figure out what was going on, the service authority was reporting that there were fewer complaints about the odor. Our epidemiology team was saying that we're not connecting any kind of an associated illness to exposure to the drinking water. There were a lot of different people who were trying to flush the water out of the distribution system. So there were a lot of different people that were having various ways of contact with drinking water. We talked to our toxicology team, we talked with the US EPA. All of our sampling says it fully meets federal and state standards. They just still have this odor that's lingering and we don't know what's causing it. And so at this point, the agency, along with the service authority, were comfortable moving from a do not use to a do not drink, which essentially means that we don't want you to consume it, using it for food consumption, but you can now take a shower with it if you want it, you can wash your clothes if you want it, you can do things that were non-consumption based. And we kept that on, not because the sampling showed any problem, but because people were still smelling it. And we, as the agency doing our inspections, could also smell it, but we knew each day it was getting a little bit better. So somewhere around in here on the 24th, when we were talking about changing this, the service authority reported that they had a major failure at its intake. They had they have 3 pumps and 2 chambers down by the river. And so the service authority said, we've got a major problem with our pumps down there at the river. And it so happened, which I failed to mention this, is that the service authority was in the middle of a construction work down by the river where this intake was going on. They were updating their intake. And so they had some temporary electrical wiring to some new pumps. And so the service authority had some emergency rental pumps delivered on the 24th, and getting the contractor to pull the 2 failed pumps that we thought were there at the time. When they ultimately, it was decided all 3 pumps had a problem and they needed some work. So another time the contractor came out and would pull the 3rd pump on the 27th of August. So they were doing the emergency pumps and drawing directly from the river. So they were bypassing the chambers where this water was held, where the 3 pumps had failed. And that's going to be a key important point on the slides. Next slide, please. So that gave us a new clue with pump failures and something else to sort of start honing in on and trying to think about. As I was saying, we're still doing daily inspections of the water treatment plant. We're still not finding anything causing the odor. We started to pull in some researchers, one from Dr. Dietrich from Virginia Tech, and then she connected this to a taste and odor expert out of Texas, J. Hunter Adams, who ran a lab in Wichita Falls in Texas. And then we also had a researcher, I think it's actually the Texas State Institute of Texas, that was there. And so we started doing some additional sampling. So one of the things that we're also trying to do is figure out The standard lab testing was not finding anything. So let's go to more sensitive testing equipment. Who's got that? What kinds of things can we look for that wouldn't be part of the standard SWOT of things that we were looking for? Again, we're still in this phase and we don't know what caused the odor. So, this turns out to be one of the key areas where it helps us kind of figure this out. Next slide, please. On the day that then we finally get to the point where we transition from the do not drink to lifting of the advisory. And so the reason that we lifted the advisory is because all of the sampling is showing that the water fully complied with federal and state standards. The odor in the water had sufficiently dissipated out. We knew that there was no longer an odor at the water treatment plant. So all the drinking water leaving the water treatment plant had no odor to it. And so if you still, as a customer, if you were still having this odor, it was a matter of getting the fresh water from the water treatment plant to your house. And so when that do not use was going on, some people, sort of basically just shut off all the water in their house. And it was causing some sediment buildup in some of the hot water heaters, perhaps. So you got a sort of, a 50 to 80 gallon tank in your house that can settle out. And so when we converted from the do not use to the do not drink, the service authority started seeing a significant impact in the cooling of the fresh water through from the water treatment system plant to the community. So that was helpful because we're trying to get that odor out of the water. So Governor Youngkin, at his direction, and Secretary Janet Kelly, they asked the Department of Environmental Quality and the Department of Health to take every action necessary to sort of try and figure out what caused this odor. This is sort of a unique and unprecedented kind of situation. And as I was saying about earlier with the roles and responsibilities, the drinking water program, we're drinking water experts. We've got engineers and drinking water experts. We don't have forensic investigators, on our team. So this was quite the challenge. We were leaning into our partner agency, DEQ, that had more experience in pollution incident help. They were helping us connect some dots and working with the researchers in Texas. So then we sort of, so based on the epidemiology, based on the toxicology, based on the efforts with USFDA, based on everything that we were seeing, we were comfortable at the health department to lift the advisory. We also got a clue on around this time that isovanillin, which is an isomer of vanillin. And vanillin is commonly used in the food industry. And so isovanillin has a little bit different chemical structure. The researcher in Texas said that isovanillin is part of the issue causing that odor, that WD-40 odor. As a matter of fact, isovanillin is a product within WD-40. And so that was a real big clue for us about why would isovanillin be in the water. And so we then scheduled a crowdsource meeting and we pulled in some national experts and some water utility experts from across Virginia. And we had a brainstorming session, again, not knowing that those failed pumps were caused. And we sort of outlined what kinds of things are we not considering? Are there some blind spots? Are there things that we're not thinking about that might be causing this? And we continued our inspections. Next slide, please. So we had the crowdsource meeting. We got some best practices on monitoring raw water. That'll end up being a recommendation. I'll talk about in a couple of minutes that's coming. And then what we figured out that the first pump failure, there were 3 down there near the river. The first pump failure failed on either the 19th or the 20th. Later, we discovered it's actually the 20th, the day before everyone started smelling the odor. And then each of these pumps had 6.5 gallons roughly of food grade mineral oil in it. And so you connect the vanillin with food grade, and it starts bringing some things more to light for us as we're working on this. But the the pump manufacturer, when we interviewed the pump mechanic and the pump company, and one of the things the pump mechanic says, I've been doing this for 40 years. I've never seen a pump failure like this before. I've never seen 2 to 3 gallons of mineral oil get released, from one of these pump failures. And so, Taste the Next odor expert also then started observing a chemical called benzaldehyde, which is also used in the food industry, and it's very common. It has no health effects, and so that was another chemical that was in the water, providing another. Next slide, please. Here's a picture of an internal part of the pump, and you can see it's blackened. It's been scorched, burned, and so we think that that's part of what caused the odor is that mineral oil was heated up, scorched, burned, and there's evidence that the catastrophic pump failure was rather significant. Next slide, please. So then we went back to those wells that I said where the 3 pumps had been taken out to be repaired. That water was still there from the very beginning of the incident because the emergency pumps were pulling directly from the river. So when we look in there, we did a couple of tests. So mineral oil is different types of hydrocarbon based, and it will have somewhere in the carbon 15 to carbon 50 range, or carbon 10 to carbon 28. The mineral oil will have this, and we found that this type of substance was in both of those chambers where these pumps had catastrophically failed. Nothing too surprising. If you lost 2 to 3 gallons of mineral oil, you might expect to see it where these wells are. So that was another clue for us that we were getting this in there. Next slide, please. So we sort of close it out. We sent the actual mineral oil that the pump manufacturer had that's used for these pumps, food grade mineral oil, and we sent that to the expert down in Texas who was helping us out, and he heated up the mineral oil and it gave him the WD-40 smell. And so from the expert in Texas's perspective, he was able to sensory connect by odor, heating up the mineral oil to the odor that was in the water, because we had sent him samples of from prior when we were trying to figure out what was going on with the water. So he had samples to compare the burning of the mineral oil to the water samples that had the odor, and he said it's basically the same odor. And he ran a soon-to-be published method to try and figure that out. So this new standard method 2150 is unpublished. He's one of the authors for this standard, and he expects it to be published by the end of the year this year. So basically, that's kind of how we were connecting the mineral to the odor in the water. Next slide, please. So ultimately, well, the one concerning hint that we got was on the first day when we had the do not use advisory in place on the 21st. We got this Biz 2-chloroethyl ether, and we detected it just above where the labs can detect it at 10 parts per billion. So this 13.7 micrograms per liter parts per billion. It was a very small amount of it. It's colorless, non-flammable, and you can't really sense it. So we don't think that was the cause of the odor, but with the burning of the components, the coatings on the internal parts of the motor, the wire coatings for the wiring, those sorts of things, could produce this because there's chlorine being added and there could have been some sort of chemical. We only saw this one time. We saw it at a very low level. It was on the same day that the odors were first noticed, and it was during the do not use advisory. We got multiple hits for isovanilla. So as I was saying, we had 98 different samples, 2,300 plus analytes being tested. We were getting consistent hits on isovanillin, and as I already said, it's at a very low level, so 8 to 10 parts per billion, and the human nose can detect that below what standard lab methods can detect, is the way I'm sort of understanding it. So we think that was what was really the specific chemical within the mineral oil causing the odor. But to this point, we haven't been able to get isovanillin from the mineral oil. That would help us out. So the chloromethane was another chemical that's a something that derives from exposure to chlorine in the water. So chlorine interacts with organics and it creates disinfection byproducts, as we call it. And this would be in that category of a disinfection byproduct. It doesn't have any short-term health effects, but exposure over many years at certain levels, and we've got rules around that. You know, that could be of importance, but we're working with the Service Authority on disinfection byproducts, which is a separate issue from this event. Next slide, please. Then I already mentioned the hits with the mineral oil where the pumps had failed. And again, this is giving you the piece of, we can connect that to the mineral oil, you know, when we saw this. Next slide, please. So basically on Friday last week, we were able to conclude the investigation for its most part, because I think we're at a place where we feel very confident that we know what caused the event. Reaching out to the researchers that were helping us, you know, without them, we wouldn't have been able to have gotten this figured out. Without Governor Youngkin and Secretary Kelly's direction and input, we wouldn't have been doing the forensic investigation to the level that we were doing. So much thanks to them and making sure that we had the resources to be able to get this done. So we're pretty sure, you know, we've eliminated basically everything else, and this is the one that we can eliminate, and we can connect the odor from the mineral oil being heated to the odor in drinking water. So we're pretty confident about that. We're also looking about what can we do to prevent this from happening again. Obviously, you didn't see that. Next slide, please. So just sort of to give you an idea, there were many positives that we can talk about. We feel like we can prevent this from happening again, you know, based on what we know now. We believe that public health was protected throughout the event, that we made the right calls with the do not use, the do not drink, and lift the advisory when we did. I think it was a good show that we were able to respond to community needs during the do not use and the do not drink, and that we had a system in place that we relied on when that happened. I believe that we had some excellent coordination with academics and researchers at the federal level and state level. And again, we had a lot of leadership from Governor Youngkin and Secretary Kelly to make sure that we could get this job done. Next slide, please. Those are the positives. So now let's flip to the other side of that coin. And I think we had a missed opportunity to identify the catastrophic pump failure sooner. So the pumps were pulled on August the 24th, but we really didn't figure out things until September 3rd, September 4th. And it's because when those pumps were pulled, you know, this is sort of the agency assessment of this is that had there been some better communication with the contractor pulling the pumps and a deeper inspection on the day when they were being pulled, that might have led us to this sooner. And then knowing that the pump failed on the day before the odor event, had we known that sooner, then maybe we would have arrived at a solution, you know, and outcome much faster than we otherwise would have. So those are some of the learning lessons that I think would help us going forward. And, you know, just to emphasize, we looked at virtually every possible reason that odor could have been in there. And the only thing that remains is this catastrophic pump failure that coincidentally failed the day before. And we're very confident that it's not just coincidence at this point. Next slide, please. So how would we prevent this from going forward? One of the things that we think that the Service Authority can do that they're currently looking at is add some additional treatment processes at the water treatment plants. So there's some technologies that are in place that would have dealt with this, but the water treatment plant didn't have access to that. Specifically, granular activated carbon feeds or a powdered activated carbon feed would have probably helped with this incident. Another thing that I think is kind of obvious is improving on the communication and the oversight. There was a lot of construction going on at the intake. The contractor was down there. I think there was an opportunity with some better communication with the contractor and monitoring of that work that we might have been able to have had a different outcome there too. And I'll say, just the rear view mirror can be a harsh critic, right? And hindsight's 20/20 as the expression goes. So a lot of this is looking through the rear view mirror and saying, well, if we had known this then, and we could have potentially, this might have turned out a little bit differently sooner and had given the customers more confidence sooner about what was going on. One of the other things that we learned through that crowdsource meeting, some of the other surface water treatment plants, they will every hour go out to their raw water intake, draw a sample, heat it up on a burner and smell it and see if it smells different than it should. And if that type of procedure had been with the water treatment plant, then there was an opportunity to have contained the odor event at the water treatment plant before it reached the customers. And so that'll probably be one of the recommendations that we'll offer up as the best practice going forward. Next slide, please. So for the next steps, the service authority is thinking about holding a town hall or some community outreach. They're working through that and thinking about how they want to address their 13,000 customers that experience and some of the concerns. There's an article today that I happened to see as I was coming in from Charlottesville tomorrow that does a deep dive with some of the customers. So there's a lot of media attention with this. And I think there's a good opportunity to reach out to the customers. The service authority needs to work with an engineering firm, get us some plans to try and update those treatment processes so that we can avoid this in the future. We're going to offer up an investigative summary with these kinds of recommendations that I'm sharing today, sort of walk through and help to explain to the public what happened. One of the big questions that we are getting is why couldn't we have known this sooner? I sort of tried to address that and where there were opportunities to figure this out sooner potentially. And the last bullet point is that, as I said, on the roles and responsibilities, the state agency permits the service authority to operate this water system. We have compliance and oversight and enforcement authority. So we're looking at what we observed through this event, and we're considering what next steps might be needed as part of that compliance, enforcement, oversight authority that we have with respect to the service authority. So I don't know where that will play out, but with respect to the investigative summary and decision on that, I'm hoping that we'll be able to push that out for the next couple of weeks. And hopefully I didn't take too much time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you for that presentation. Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. Sorry for my tardiness. I hear a lot of that you think, and you think that you've gotten to the answer. And one of my questions was indeed, what do you have in place, or what did you have in place to reduce the risk that we encountered here? But also, my second question to that is, this was odor. What if it was odorless?
Yeah, odorless would be much more problematic. And as a matter of fact, it reminds me of an incident in West Virginia that a movie was made about where there was some odorless contaminants in the drinking water, and it wasn't discovered for quite some time, and it had very negative impact. So, in this particular case, what happens is that there's, you've got operators, they operate a water treatment plant. Their job is to monitor different aspects, water quality from the water treatment plant. So as far as reducing risks and being on top of that, you've got a trained operator staff, licensed operator staff who are on site at the water treatment plant, and their job when they're at the water treatment plant is to monitor water quality, what's coming in, what's coming out. There's different types of things that are sampled and tested at the water treatment plant on a regular basis. But getting to the unknown, can't sense it kind of contaminant, that will always remain an issue and a concern. So, for example, to just give you a comparison with bottled water, for example, there's contaminants related to per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS. That's colorless, odorless. It can be in the drinking water. There's no standards with bottled water, but we do have emerging standards with drinking water on the public water side. And so microplastics is another example of that. So with if you're drinking from a plastic bottle with bottled water, you can have some exposure to microplastics, and you wouldn't sense it, smell it, notice it, that sort of thing. So there are a lot of things in the environment that we can get exposed to that we wouldn't sense, taste, smell, that we need to be mindful about. There are rules and regulations and safety standards that are in play. And the first line of defense is the service authorities, operators, their training level, their license level, their experience level, and what they're testing for.
So I'm just saying to follow up to that, I'm sorry. You're saying I understand all of the other stuff, the PFAS, the microbes and the plastic and all that, but for the drinking water that we're consuming and not being able to detect, like say for example, we live in a very dangerous world right now. And those 30,000, there's gonna be one of me asking the same questions, like, what are you gonna do? If there's, a threat level, poison, odorless, and, tasteless coming in, all the expert, is there a testing mechanism? I'm not talking about taking a cup of water, boiling it and doing all kind of stuff. Is something running through and looking at these threats and saying, yes, we have something before it goes up to the community?
Yeah, so to the extent that we're able to do that, with money and resources, that happens. So as I was saying.
So you just mentioned Youngkin, so I'm like, what?
Yeah, I mean, so Governor Youngkin gave us direction on the investigation, gave us leadership on the investigation, and made sure, because this isn't a routine kind of thing, for us to investigate forensically what would have caused the odor event. So that the governor's attention to giving us resources and direction is where I was going with that inside. Now, on the other side of it, as I said earlier, this is a federally regulated program at a federal level. And so you have to comply with federal requirements that are the minimum standards across all states. And so what we feel confident in is that those minimum standards at the federal level do a good job of protecting drinking water in Virginia and in the other states. So I don't know if that gets to the answer. I mean, there's always something that could be out there that we need to deal with, like PFAS, microplastics, or some of the emerging contaminants. But generally speaking, I feel very confident in our drinking water.
I just had a quick comment on the point you just made about bottled water. So you're saying that municipal, like water that's supplied out through like cities and towns, has a higher standard of testing than bottled water?
With respect to PFAS, definitely. And my other point being is that you can expect greater exposure to microplastics with bottled water.
Because there's all this big marketing that bottled water is supposed to be superior and great, better than municipal water. But it seems,
so you're talking
it seems from your comments that the public water has more testing requirements than say these bottles do.
So to put it at how it's regulated, bottled water is regulated with the Federal Drug Administration, the FDA, and then the public water is regulated from the US EPA. And a lot of your bottled water will come from municipal public water.
Jensen, I think.
Yes.
Thank you. I just want to know, would you only have one water intake
There's one intake and 3 pumps.
and 3 pumps? And what do you use for do you use a tower or are you going? Trying to think, well, do you use a reservoir to store your water?
There's 2 basins, at the river intake, that one basin, it's in the ground, so you would go to it, look up a chamber and look down. One pump is in one chamber and then 2 pumps are in another chamber.
Okay, so you don't have a reservoir, basically, you just have pumps tanks in the ground?
But Tim, this is a run of the river plant.
Okay,
There's no reservoir associated with it at this point.
what did you call the term?
Run of the river. We're dependent on the river.
Okay,
So whatever's in the river at any given time is what we're pumping up to the water treatment plant to be treated.
okay, thank you. I'm asking because as you know, King George has to go to an alternative water source, so I'm asking. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious, how often are those pumps inspected? From the picture that you showed, I'm curious just how often are they inspected?
Yes, so that's a great question. The pump that failed that I showed you pictures was a month old. We reached out to the pump manufacturer to find out what the routine maintenance of that is. I don't know what that is offhand. Jeremy, do you know what the maintenance of Tim on the Tim? Do you have any thoughts on that? Yeah. Once these pumps are in service, the only maintenance on there's two means of maintenance. That is the impeller well wearing retainer and seals. Those are all affected by how corrosive, sandy the river might be. So the wear. There's nothing for the plant operators to do. So when there's normally you'll start to see a decrease in production from them. We figure that's a wear rate. If a seal starts to fail, they have seal failure alarms in them, which triggers a signal back to the plant and it's supposed to shut the pump down. We call the repair shop, they come and pull it, they go through it, put new seals in it, goes back in service. The oldest 2 of these pumps were 1.5 years old. The other one was less than a month. So they're considered fairly new.
Okay, so follow up, Mr. Chair. So were there no notifications or safety procedures in place to notify the computer, I guess, that this pump was in the condition that it was in?
Yeah, that's another great question, and it's one of the things that on my recommendation slide about communication and being more tuned in with the contractors. So I think your point is valid. That gets into the hindsight. I think that if we would have had better communication and more robust communication with the contractor. Now on the sensory side of it, there are controls to tell you that there's a problem. But in this particular case, those sensory controls didn't tell you that it was a catastrophic failure. It just told you the pump's not working and you can't see it because it's in a well or river water and you just can't physically see it unless you pull it out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. If I understood correctly, it sounded like there was a bit of a surprise that we had food grade mineral oil in the pumps in the first place. If we only have 3 pumps, is there not a way to get that kind of information ahead of time so that you kind of know what to sample for, looking forward to something failing again?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do have a regulation that requires the oil used in these submersible pumps for drinking water to be food grade mineral oil. And it's designed, that rule is designed for this very type of incident. What we found is that when we went back looking at the safety data sheets for the mineral oil, the specific mineral oil that was used in this pump, and we went to the manufacturer of that mineral oil, it is virtually impossible to know what the various types of chemicals that are present in that mineral oil, other than to say that it meets national standards to be considered food grade. And so the best we were able to get from the manufacturer is that the benzaldehyde and the isovanillin could easily be produced from that or could be produced, not easily produced, but could be produced from that mineral oil. And so I think that, I mean, your question is a good one, about trying to make sure that we know exactly what the chemicals are that are in the water treatment plant and the materials that are being used, so that in the event of this type of issue, you can go look at those safety data sheets. That's one of the things our sister agency did a lot of at the beginning, was pulling, different safety data sheets and reporting from the dischargers and that sort of thing. So I don't have a really good, easy answer other than to say that, the mineral oil met some national standards for food grade. But when you try to dig underneath that onion and peel that onion apart, you can't get to, there's isovanillin or vanillin in that food grade mineral oil.
Yeah, so I dual role, I work in law enforcement as well, to oversee homeland security. And so when this happens, working through my supervisor acting in emergency management and fire rescue, it seemed like the information that we were getting as to whether it was going to impact the Rappahannock River, whether it was going to impact Stafford, was kind of slow drip of information. And so I was wondering if there was any complaints around, communication to multi-jurisdictions in terms of, which you don't want to panic the public, but you also want to have a plan in place in case it does impact. So have you heard anything like that?
Yeah. So it's another great question. There were concerns that I heard and have heard about them, not as robust communication as we would wanted. I do know that Jeremy Holstein reached out to the downslope water intakes, and they went to an alternate source while we, were trying to investigate what the cause was. We engaged, our sister agency engaged local law enforcement and state police initially, because we didn't know what this might be. And so there was some initial help from that area as well. Looking at, was there a bad actor in Septic?
Okay. Any other questions?
One question on frequency of sampling municipal water systems. If memory serves me correctly, the system that I'm most familiar with, I thought we only sampled once a month. Is that, we're talking about, real-time testing. Once a month wouldn't do you a whole lot of good in a situation like this. So
yeah, they're sampling for the things that they're supposed to be sampled on the frequency radar. So if you're a larger water system, you might be looking at stuff in a couple of hours.
One last question and we'll wrap up here.
Can you give us an idea of the economic costs? Then, testing, number one, is there a state funds that pays for these kind of response?
Yeah, so with respect to the funding, both agencies experienced a lot of costs. We're over 90 samples, as I said, it was 98 different samples, over 2,300 different analytes. So there's, I wouldn't be surprised if we're on the order of $10,000 to $20,000 in sampling costs over this period of time. Then you have the cost of staff, time and energy and effort. You've got, and then you've got the impacts to the community. I suspect some homeowners, based on some media that I've seen, were going to hotel rooms because it was a do not use, but they could smell it in their house, so they wanted to get out of the house, but they didn't know, I can't drink it, be exposed, people want to be drinking it, then maybe I shouldn't be smelling it either. Kind of thing. And so those were some of the other things that we were thinking about. The total cost hasn't been identified. That's one of the things that the agency, both our sister agency and ourselves, there were costs with providing bottled water, setting up water filling stations, the effort from the local community to do that. I wouldn't be surprised if that was several thousands of dollars. So the costs are going to be spread out for the state agencies. We're eating that cost, and that's a combination of federal and state dollars. as the agencies are funded. At the local level, I'm sure that it's, you know, some sort of taxpayer funded expense as well. But I don't know that it's been, as far as I know, it's not been added up in the different entities involved.
Real quick, I had it as C. I have a lot here, but I'm just gonna mention that I think that the counties, when something like this happens, every county needs to have some kind of a disaster recovery plan or emergency plan. And we need to know at the same time, is there any way that we could turn something off before it gets to our constituents, you know? I mean, it seems like it's in a bubble. You mentioned communication, but that's one thing, but having that plan, a master plan along, because this is big. You know, water is something that you consume and it could be poisonous. So I keep thinking about.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's incumbent and we do the public water systems, do you have an emergency response plan in place? And there's local emergency coordinators and there's, you know, planning that goes around this, but, you know, is it something that's sitting on the shelf that nobody's looked at? Or are you doing some bench top and working of that and testing of your emergency response plan? So I agree with you.
And we did stop pulling water from that restaurant.
Like morning, yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Sounds like they had sort of a pump quality issue here too as well. I would imagine that pump should last a little longer than a year.
Yeah, so we, you know,
Or in this case, a month.
Yeah. We are anticipating that the cause of those pump failures is related to the construction work and being some sort of an electrical issue associated with that construction activity that they intake.
So just to close up and follow up on this presentation, what do you perceive as the next steps or follow-ups that your agency is planning to do?
We're going to do the investigative summary. We're going to offer some recommendations, and then we're going to follow. There may be some sort of enforcement action associated with it that's still being evaluated. And then on the Rapidan Service Authority side of it, they're going to look at community engagement of some sort, outreach to their citizens. They're going to also look at working with an engineering firm to perhaps add some additional treatment.
And will that recommendation just be applied to this service authority, or will it apply to similar service authorities across the Commonwealth?
You know, it's great. It's a great point. What we're going to do internally with the drinking water staff, we've got about 120 drinking water professionals on our team throughout the Commonwealth. And so, you know, what we're going to do is train or do sort of a case study with our team and then sort of do an evaluation internally about when we go out and do inspections at water treatment plants, maybe we should start doing some things differently. What I learned from our inspection of water treatment plants, historically, we've never asked about the mineral oil in the pumps at the water treatment plant. And that may be a change that we make internally.
Do you think some regard to that could be like, say, larger localities may have the staff and expertise around their water authority that something like this would even get addressed or be held more internally before it went up the chain so quickly? In this case, it seems to the top levels, and once something gets really far to the top, it's hard to like bring it back down.
Yeah, I think your general point that the larger the utility, the more resources and ability that they can apply to communications and follow up and investigation. So yeah, I mean,
if somebody gets on the horn and calls the governor and says there's a water problem, then all of a sudden there's a major water problem when it wasn't really maybe a major problem to begin with.
Yeah, those kinds of things happen. not necessarily in this case, but those kinds of things do happen.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just make a comment. I'm Ted Voorhees, I'm the Orange County Administrator, and I served as the emergency manager during this event for the county. I also happen to sit on the RSA board. I think this presentation is very informative and pretty accurate. We heard it at the Board of Supervisors meeting last week. I do want to just park a reservation about enforcement action. I know that's still being adjudicated. But you know, I'm sort of positioned between all these agencies, and in my opinion, the RSA did a pretty good job of communicating and trying to sort it out and trying to be protective of their customers. I didn't see anything, and I run very large and very small water systems over my 34-year career. I didn't see anything that would give me pause about, their judgment and trying to communicate what was going on. But for the rest of us who have to deal with the public, it's been a little while since I've been in an emergent situation where communication was called into question. And I'm not speaking to Ms. Roadcap's comments about communication with the agency. I'm talking about public communication. We're in this social media world now where there were many different ridiculous rumors through this event that were just absolutely insane, unsupported, and of course the folks who post them up say, I'm an engineer or I spoke to somebody at RSA and said this. One of my children works at the Lake of the Woods Association, and it was exciting for me to learn that the suspect had been arrested who had sabotaged the system. And they called me to say, do you know about this? And I said, well, that's not true, but I'm interested in knowing more. And so, well, this was a security person from Lake of the Woods who's when questioned as to why the county didn't know about it, they said, well, we're a private entity with private security, so we don't have to tell the county. So the sheriff and I got a good laugh out of that one. So you have these actors constantly during this time through Nextdoor, Facebook, Insta, SnapX, whatever, all that stuff going on in these little worlds. And every one of them is mad as hell that they don't know more. While we're trying to work across multiple agencies and to decide what is the tempo of public communication that needs to happen and can we get it accurate? And that is a challenge. There were times when we were at odds with one another about exactly what to say and how quickly can we say it, because we wanted to get it out there. I think that tension is necessary and good, and ultimately the information produced to the public was as accurate as we could have come up with, and pretty good, pretty accurate along the course of the event. And a couple of times we had to change course just a little bit, but we did. The decision was to put it centrally on an incident webpage and make that the authoritative source, and then the county communication, the RSA communication, and the Lake of the Woods community communication would sort of come off of that base of information. That's frankly the best we can do with a county, a mid-sized county, a mid-sized water operator. I'm sorry, we're not, we don't have the resources of the district with the Corps of Engineers running their water plant and, WRC running news conferences. We just can't do that. And so these people in this Facebook world, I can't get all exercised about how insistent they were that, they know every 5 minutes what the next thing is. It's just ridiculous. And we just got to understand that that's the world we live in. I want to commend DEH, DEM, DEQ. We jumped into a unified command structure, within 24 hours of saying, uh-oh, this thing doesn't look good at all. We declared a local emergency, and we were up in that structure very quickly. And everyone worked across lines pretty well. So I do think it works. If you all have an emergency, I wouldn't hesitate to declare a local emergency, because people then swing to, and that's what needs to happen. So notwithstanding my hope that no sanction comes down, everything else about the report, I'm very comfortable with the chairman of the RSA board, and I've spoken about this. He's comfortable as well. We certainly look to make some plant upgrades, but one thing that folks, and this will be my last comment, that folks need to remember over time is RSA was created many years ago to pull in a very disparate collection of independent package plants, well systems, and sewer package plants that were across 3 counties. So it's not like RSA, stood up and then built all this themselves, and then, maybe somebody's wondering whether maintenance was good or not. This was a 3-county, Green is no longer in it, but it was Green, Orange, and Madison created an authority to try to knit together the kinds of systems that some of you probably know about that are out there that are, kind of substandard, and to try to bring it together into a more thoughtful, planned, unified system. And so it still has work to do, and it won't be able to be, Arlington or Fairfax, probably ever, but it's a far cry from what it inherited.
You don't have the traffic though.
With that,
You don't have the traffic.
that's true. The tourism is increasing. Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts.
Thank you very much. A lot of important comments on that very important topic. Terry had to leave, so we're going to move his presentation on Sentinel Landscapes to the December meeting, and we'll carry on now with item number 6, the Culpeper Soil and Water Septic Program.
Thank you.
Chairman, as Amanda gets started, this is a continuation of the septic discussion that began at the last commission meeting where we heard from Peninsula PDC about their investigation of how to deal with their problem of sea level rise and water flowing uphill and what that does to septic systems. Now we're going to get a perspective from the upper basin. And of course, that's going to be followed by more of a statewide perspective from DEQ. Just to put us in context.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, everyone. My name is Amanda McCullen. I'm a conservation specialist with the Culpeper District. When I started with the district in about 2016 to about 2018, I helped with the septic program and took applications. Today I primarily work on the agricultural programs we offer, so I'm going to take you through that. I'm notorious for speaking softly, so in the back, kind of wave at me if you can't hear me. And I'm ready for slides. I'll just get started. So we cover 5 counties. We're the largest district in the state. You all are probably very familiar with districts, but every county and locality is covered by a district. We cover 5 counties, Rappahannock, Culpeper, Madison, Green, and Orange shown there. We can jump ahead to the next slide. We have a large area. We have 138,000 and growing constituents, over 1,450 square miles. We have a lot of territory to cover. Our staff is growing, but we still have a lot of calls and inquiries that come in. We were founded in 1939 and we're a political subdivision of the Commonwealth. So we're an interesting entity. And next slide. Thank you. So I always like to remind people about why districts were created. There was a growing need leading up to the Dust Bowl for local technical support, local experts that could talk to you about soil inversion needs. And so what kind of pushed things forward was there was a scientist named Giese in Basin, who's now been appointed the father of soil conservation, who was doing a lot of research and was able to push forward movement for districts due to the Dust Bowl. We move ahead to the next slide. And so he was really pushing for that. And that led to the Standard State District Act, the creation of all districts in 1936. He took it upon himself to use a dust storm that was coming to really push his point forward, and filibustered and just kept talking until that storm hit to really prove his point. So we'll move forward. So here's our mission statement: to promote the stewardship of soil and water and the conservation of natural resources through education, technical assistance to manage, protect, and enhance the land and water for the benefit of all our constituents. So move ahead. We do a lot of things. Primarily, we administer the Virginia Agricultural Cost Share Program. We also help with the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program for residential erosion issues. We are one of the districts that also have a septic program, so highlight on today for you all. We do a lot of technical assistance. Anyone that calls our office within our 5 counties, we are available as a resource to connect them with additional partner agencies to come out to their farms, their properties, hear what their concerns are, and try to address all of those either through our office or partners. And a large way that we do this is through grants. So we'll move ahead and I'll talk about how we fund our septic program. So it's an important reminder about why we have reimbursement for septic systems. Most pollutants can reach groundwater. So where we are in a rural area, there are areas that do not have a septic system in place. People are usually very quiet about that, but there are still homes that exist like that. Just gray water systems and a malfunctioning system can be leaching to the groundwater. So I gave a clip here to an article I came across recently. It's from 2015. It's in New York and New England, so it's not pointing any fingers here in Virginia. But it was an interesting read. It's pretty short, and it's talking about how when that groundwater level is close to the surface, how easy it is for septic system pollutants to get in there. And you know, there's kind of some scary things when you start thinking about it, what can be in there, what can be detected. So we'll move along. Next slide, please. We have a number of funding sources, primarily through the State General Assembly and the Virginia Natural Resources Commitment Fund. We also have tremendous local support from our 5 counties, which we're very grateful for. They support us financially as well as with outreach. And then we also apply for grants, a lot of which come from DEQ, especially with our septic program. We've applied for the WQIF Water Quality Initiative Fund, as well as TNPLs, and especially for educational purposes, we apply for grants with other organizations, such as NOAA or the Chesapeake Bay License Plate Grant. So we'll move along. And so just a reminder that a lot of this funding is generated from the Clean Water Act and the Chesapeake Bay TNPL. Ready for the next slide. And so our district primarily drains to the Rappahannock and Rapidan rivers. So we are largely in the Rappahannock River watershed. And today we're right there at the parks. Jump ahead. So with the septic practices, they're outlined through DEQ in their best management practices manual. There are a handful of practices that an applicant can choose what they're going to apply for. They can apply for a standalone pump out, which is recommended every 3 to 5 years. Some localities, as well are aware, require that, but there's not really a way to check that. Our counties do not require that. For conventional systems. We also have a practice now for a pump out and inspection. This is a great thing to have done. Some septic contractors will do a walkover of a septic field and call it an inspection. That doesn't tell you much. A true inspection and what we require on our form is that they actually dig up the distribution box. It's not very hard to do. They take a look at it. You can know a lot about where your system's at and the age of it from that. Is the lid there? Is it deteriorating? Is it level? Some of the newer distribution boxes have something called an easy flow data, where the contractor can see that effluent's not going evenly to all of the drain field lines, and they can adjust it right there. That can save you over $10,000 from replacing the drain field later on. So that is a great practice and recommendation, and we make sure that homeowners are aware they need to dig up the distribution box and actually look at it and not walk over. We also have some programs for repairs when those are needed. Some of those are permitted and will go through the health department for the permit. Some of them are not. We can help replace a failing system. We can help get an alternative system in if there is no system, or if a conventional system was installed initially, but the soils actually don't support that. So the homeowner is left with a failing system. We can also help people connect to public sewer when they're eligible for that, if their system's feeling they have a need for that. Right now, we are able to offer funding countywide within our 5 districts. A large part of that funding, though, is still TNPL focused, so it's watershed specific. The reimbursement starts at 50%, and we'll jump to the next slide and you can see those ranges. So through the BMP program for the septic, the reimbursement starts at 50% for all income levels. You'd be surprised of the applicants we have. I've been to $1 million homes. I've been to homes that doing this practice, literally seemed unattainable. So there's a sliding scale where based on household income, we can reimburse up to 80%. We'll jump ahead to the next slide. When I was working on the program, I always brought this handout with me of some groups within our 5 counties that at times could offer additional assistance. It may not have been specific to septic. They may not have been able to help. They're very clear about that. We try to help them they can. But sometimes that 20% out of pocket can make a big difference for somebody and whether they can actually do it. And so we try to make sure we are connected with all of our resources in our counties and can help that out and get the work done. So we'll jump ahead. So with the TMDLs, the process, as many of you are probably aware, the Clean Water Act requires that Virginia's waters are tested and sampled. Those are required to be put into a study every 2 years. DEQ runs that program and is monitoring it. When a watershed is impaired, a TMDL study comes about. From that study, an implementation plan goes through development. That has a number of processes. And so sometimes you can be in a locality that has an implementation plan under development, and it just needs to be pushed through to a full grant. And our manager and our office work with DEQ and partner agencies a lot to keep those moving forward. So once the implementation plan is in place, then the funds become available for agencies and organizations to apply for. As soil and water districts, we apply for those funds, and then once granted, we do the work, we submit our quarterly reports, and get that grant project completed. We'll move ahead. So these are our current active TMDL grants in project areas: the Upper Hazel, the Robinson River, Upper Rapidan, Upper York, and one of our newer ones, the Mountain Run, Letting Run, Lower Hazel watershed. So we'll jump ahead and I've got some maps for you guys. The Hazel River watershed map is listed here. You can see Route 211 and top of the map, Washington and Sperryville listed. The Hazel has been a grant we've had for a long time, and our septic program goes back to 2007 and actually started in Rappahannock County. It was a very joint effort, and Mitch Carter, who used to work in the health department, was an extremely great resource for the district. I wasn't with the district at the time yet, but she helped train our staff. She's always been very available. She had a great reputation in the county to residents. And so that first grant really helped get our footing for having the program and our staff trained. So moving forward, this is our fiscal year 23 numbers. I don't have 24 consolidated yet, so this is 2 fiscal years ago. This shows the projects we got done in that specific watershed, 14 total for 22,000 from that map in the previous slide. So we'll jump ahead and look at the total of the last 5 years in the Hazel. We were able to complete 197 projects for almost 250,000. We'll jump ahead. I'm going to give you guys a lot of maps and numbers. So this is the Robinson River watershed. We are looking at Madison County here. You can see Syria, town of Madison in the middle of the map, and then locus scale. And we'll jump ahead to look at the total numbers in the previous year. We were able to complete 61 projects. You can see the practices broken out there, and a total of 62,000. We'll move to the next watershed for the 5-year. So the 5-year total completed projects is 214 for a total of 230,000. Here's the Upper Rapidan River watershed. We are looking at the western boundaries of Green Madison, coming all the way down to Orange and Somerset there, so crossing 29, and we'll move to the numbers. So 21 projects for 33,000, and we'll jump to the 5-year summary. We have 182 projects completed and $247,000 allocated to those projects. And here's the Upper York River watershed. So this is southeast of Orange, and you can see the different colors here. The sub watershed is broken out. Jump to the numbers slide. So 38 projects completed for $72,000 of cost share reimbursed to those individuals. And I'll jump to the 5-year. 162 projects for a total of $241,000. And this is a summary of our 4-year WQIF grant that we applied for with DEQ. This was a grant that we were able to apply to all 5 of our counties district-wide. It wasn't watershed based. If somebody called in and they said they were in one of our counties, they were eligible as long as the home was occupied and was residential. So during that time, that total at the bottom was 297 projects and 434,000. This was a very busy time. This is when I started with the district. We had calls just rolling in. It was great for us to be able to operate countywide. 2 out of 5 of our counties. It's very easy to market. It's very easy to tell people. It's not the best. It doesn't feel the best when you tell somebody, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're just outside the watershed," that we had funding for. Did you have a question, Brian?
No, I was agreeing with that statement.
Okay, gotcha, thanks. So move ahead to the next slide. Thank you. And so here's the total of from July 1st of 2019 through the end of June 2023, the number of septic projects we were able to complete and how much funding we were able to allocate to our constituents for those projects. And so move ahead. So a lot of numbers here, just wanted them as a resource for you guys. We're going to go by counties. You can see Culpeper County, all of the baby grants for the septic program came out to 234 projects over that period for 344,000. To Green County has a lower population, so the number is a little smaller. 91 projects for 115,000. Madison County had 295 projects for 335,000. Orange, 285 projects for 461,000. Rappahannock, 162 projects for 213,000. So these are stuff, this is a newer TMDL grant we have, so we are being signed up for this, but don't have the numbers today. This is the Muddy Run, Mountain Run watershed. So you can see 522, 229, and 15 for those who live around here. We're coming together basically in the town of Culpeper. Next one. This is the North Fork Rapidan River watershed. So this is an example of one that IP has been around for a little bit, and we're working on the community meetings to get that grant moving forward. So this is one for Green County that we're trying to get to an IP plan for. The lower Rapidan River is also one that's under IP development. This is south of Culpeper. Jump ahead. So we try to do a lot of outreach so that nobody says, "I didn't know I could have gotten reimbursed for that." With these projects, like all best management practices, our agricultural one, as well as the VCAP residential one, you do have to apply first. We do have a mechanism in place that DEQ agreed to, that we have an emergency clause. So if someone makes contact with us within 24 or 48 hours of their emergency, leave a phone call, it's a Saturday, we can use that to get their application started and keep them eligible. We have a quarterly newsletter that goes out. We have land use feelings that we send out. Primarily for ag, but that we inform everyone about all of our practices. But articles in the newspaper, when they'll pick up the story up, our counties and towns are great about letting us include it in their quarterly newsletters. We have some signs that some participants will let us put up while the project is going on. Word of mouth has been great. Our health departments help us out so much. A lot of times when someone comes in for a permit, our health department staff will say, "Have you talked to Culpeper Soil and Water? You could get reimbursed for this." Our contractors are very good at that. They're the ones that are doing those emergency situations. Sometimes they contact us directly to make sure they're giving good information. And we also have it on our website. So we jump to the next slide. On our website, we spell out the full program. We do have applicants contact us for the application, and we do a site visit. That helps us make sure it's really clear information going to them. We go into contract with them, and it just makes a really smooth process moving forward. And the last slide. And so I'll just open it up to see if anyone has any questions.
Any questions?
The funding that you get for this cost share, where is it coming from?
Primarily from DEQ for the TMDL grants.
Okay, and then it goes by, depending on which county
The watersheds can overlap the counties, and so it goes back to that implementation plan, and the study that DEQ has that's watershed specific. Those maps, we can get from DEQ, and what's really great is they get uploaded in our system. So we're able to really, look at them.
Looking at the numbers, if you have some counties had more than less, so do you ever run out of money for a particular county or?
With the
is it-
TMDL grants we have, and we'll do wait lists, for routine pump outs, you know, somebody might have for repair, somebody might have to move forward without funding. But we do maintain wait lists, to try to get funding. DEQ is really great to work with as well. If we have a need that exceeds the grant funds we have, we'll reach out and let them know to see if they have available funds, maybe from a project that's getting completed somewhere else that didn't spend all of their funds. We've regularly been able to work with DEQ and get additional funds for team deals or extend them. It might be a 2-year grant and it's successful and we're able to just keep rolling. The Hazel is a great example of that. That has been around for a number of years. It has also, we have had delistings through that, so that's always what you want to see, is that the water quality is improving. We've had a couple of delistings and improvements, so for example, our Hazel River TMPL grant, the area has gotten smaller over time, which is a good thing, for water quality.
I have just a quick question. You had mentioned earlier, those that have traditional septics and then they fail and due to whatever Chesapeake Bay rules, where they cannot put those back in. How do they know they need an alternative system and where do they go to get that?
So I'll say the caveat, I don't, I'll leave out the part about Chesapeake Bay.
Right.
I don't know about the.
Right, but just if that happens
Yeah,
to
so
them.
when somebody has a conventional system and it fails, maybe it shouldn't have been a conventional system to start with. There are on-site soil, inspectors licensed that can help do that soil study. That would be a permitted, work as well, so it's gonna go through the health department as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the homeowner's not responsible for figuring that out.
Any other questions?
I may have missed you saying this in your presentation. Do you guys ever pay for advanced septic systems?
What do you mean advanced?
The ones that were a little more expensive, the peat moths or some of the smaller ones that take, we have no secondary soils left to try to use on a failing system. We have to go to a
Alternative or.
alternative, yeah.
We can help, yeah, we can help with those when it's required based on the soils. Yeah, or, limitations of a lot size, for example.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Those are usually a last resort. They're more expensive, they're permitted.
Yeah.
Routine maintenance, so you only get those when you need.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you guys.
Next up, continuing on the same topic, we have septic successes and strategies from the State Department. Kevin, welcome, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to be with you again. I am Kevin McLean. I'm the Chesapeake Bay Program Manager with Virginia DEQ, and I'm based out of our central office in Richmond. While she's bringing the slides up, I just wanted to say that I'm going to give a little bit of background on the broad effort that we've been doing. Presentation just on a perfect snapshot of what's kind of going on with the local and soil water conservation districts, and I'll give that kind of higher level state view that just starts. You can go next couple weeks. And we have a required tenant. Got to put that agency logo big on that first slide. So what I want to do before I dive fully into the septic topic, give just a few updates on Virginia DEQ's role in the federal Chesapeake Bay program and some big things we've got going on and what that might mean for the future, and then look at statewide nutrient sediment loadings. Well, we'll focus on nutrients today since there's no sediment loadings in the septic work that we're going to talk about. And then I'm going to dive a little bit into the existing agreements and the programs that we've got in place for network funding that are kind of above and beyond those existing local programs that we just heard about, some additional efforts we're taking on. Then talk about some existing sources of funding and upcoming potential programs, and of course, give some time for questions. So as a high level overview, my team at DEQ, we are responsible for coordinating the state of Virginia's participation in the federal Bay program. So We do not necessarily lead the entire effort in Virginia, but we are the ones that kind of try to herd everyone in the right direction. All of our state agency partners, the localities, and other partners that we work with. And that means that we work directly with the Secretary of Natural Resources Office on usually a daily basis, especially Deputy Secretary Septic, who is responsible for those Bay efforts. We're kind of in constant communication about where we're focusing our work, where we're headed, what priorities we should be focusing on. And within my team, kind of two big efforts that we undertake are managing 3 main sets of federal grants that come from EPA's Chesapeake Bay Program Office. I'll get into those a little bit more, but it's the main source of funding for staffing state employees that operate Virginia's Rolling Bay Program, and then creating sub-awarded grants to other state agencies, NGOs, localities that are doing that kind of work to move in that right direction. And then the other big task we have is, tracking and reporting all of the BMP implementation, that best management practice implementation. So that's every type of project you can think of, septic work being one subset of them, but all the VAX program, ag BMPs, everything across the developed sectors, septic work, preparing forest buffers, you name it. We're responsible for making sure all that data gets reported and gets passed on to EPA through their NEAN system, which is the federal version of that BMP warehouse that you mentioned. Next slide, please.
Okay, get your giant magnifying glass.
So this is on purpose, I promise. Even though it's a smaller screen, maybe than I was expecting, this is intentional that you can't see what's going on here. I'm illustrating with maybe a little bit of a comedic effect, just how big the Federal Bay Program and that partnership is and what our role looks like. So right now, we're in the midst of what is called the Beyond 2025 effort, which is a massive steering committee that's been put together in the last year and a half to take a look at where we're headed beyond 2025, which is ostensibly the end date of the current Bay Agreement that's in place, and we're supposed to have met all of our goals for nutrient sediment reductions across the Bay, not just in Virginia, but in all jurisdictions. And of course, we're now undertaking the effort to say, well, what comes next? We haven't quite reached all those goals. We're going to keep working towards them, and then we have to, at the very least, maintain the level of nitrogen and phosphorus and sediment reductions we've achieved moving forward, and how we're going to do that. We rolled out, after a year and a half of work, a set of recommendations that was out for public comment over this past summer, just closed a couple weeks ago, that had 2 really high-level recommendations. The first one was to double down on the existing agreement and remain committed to those reductions and that cleanup of the Bay that we've been doing, and also to tweak that agreement to make sure that we're still headed in the right direction, still achieving what we could achieve. The second recommendation of all the things that possibly could have been recommended out of that committee of almost 75 people was the Bay Program is too big, too complex, too cumbersome. There's too many committees, there's too many work groups, there's action teams, there's advisory committees. I mean, literally, I can list just the categories of types of committees that are in the Bay Program. And so one of the 2 recommendations was, we need to reduce the size and structure of the program. I have this up here because we've been working with the administration over the past 6 months, just to account for all the people in Virginia who serve on one of these committees. By our best estimate, there's over 160 different spots that someone from Virginia fills. Not 160 different people, because some of us are in 6 different spots on that massive spreadsheet. 12 for me, actually, to be exact. And what we're trying to do is take an accurate accounting of everyone that's involved, how many different roles they serve in within that structure, how much time they spend, and how we can do a better job of less focus on the governance and the structure of the Bay Program and more focus on the important work of getting projects on the ground and cleaning up actual water quality, which is what we're here to really talk about. So I'll go on to the next slide. So you've probably seen slides like this before. If you were here 2 meetings ago, I showed similar slides then too, but it's always important to get this update. From the spring meeting, when I presented just kind of an overall update, really the only thing that's changed on these Virginia Baywide is that it went from 2023 provisional to just 2023. That's our official numbers. That's really the only thing that's changed here. But I wanted to bring this up again because it gives some good perspective on the septic issue in particular. What you see, and this is nitrogen in Virginia's portion of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, is over time, this is 2009 to 2023. We've got data going even further back, but this is the time frame that we're really focused on with the current Bay Agreement. You can see that we are making slow and steady progress towards this green line. And that green line is the thing we need to accomplish. That is our federal planning target within the Bay PMDL for the total nitrogen that Virginia is putting in the Bay. The last bar are with-free scenarios. So we as a jurisdiction, as well as all the other jurisdictions, had to develop a plan, a watershed implementation plan. We are now in the third and final phase of that plan of how we would get below that federal planning target. That last bar is the theoretical condition. We did every single thing that's in the WIP. We accomplished every single project and every single goal that we laid out. That's where we would land. Our aim is to get there to that with-free scenario, but legally speaking, we just need to get below that green line, which you can see really close. I also just wanted to point out this yellow color, the smallest bar on here, that is our septic. And that's going to be really important for as an issue of scale on these charts. You'll see when we go to septic alone, it's going to look completely different, but you can see in the grand scheme, it's a very small load. If we go to the next slide, this is phosphorus, and you'll see that that yellow slice of the bar disappears. It is technically there. There is a very thin slice of septic loading that's built into the model on phosphorus. To put that into perspective, for the entire Rappahannock River Basin, the model phosphorus load is 309 pounds. 309,000 pounds, 309 pounds. So it's in the scheme of 7 million, 6 million pounds, it just doesn't even register. So we're going to focus on nitrogen today. And really exciting news here is that DEQ, Director Rollban in particular, spearheaded some work to updating Virginia's information that goes into the Bay model. And with the next iteration of CAST in the Bay model, we will have accomplished our federal goal, this green line for phosphorus. And we had already accomplished it for sediment, which is not even included here today. So we're doing well. We're on a good track. Next slide. So here's where the scale changes completely. This is nitrogen in the septic sector, Bay-wide in Virginia. So this is that yellow slice of the bar charts in that first graph on its own. And what you can see is the scale for nitrogen goes from 50 to 60 million for nitrogen down to 2 million. So it's a completely different scale. But what you also see is that across that time frame, we can see that our septic load for nitrogen is steadily increasing. And that this, our with 3 goal, we're not even close to at this point. That sounds like really bad news. That sounds like we're, going in the wrong direction, because essentially we are. But what this is competition with population growth. That's just a factor that plays into this. As land use changes, as more homes are built, as population grows, all that awesome work that's getting done on the ground level is offsetting a lot. This chart would look completely different if we weren't doing that work, and it's keeping us from really growing that work. If you go to the next slide, it's specifically for the Rappahannock, and you'll see it looks almost exactly the same. Again, the scale changes hugely. This is 300,000 now instead of 2 million, but the pattern is almost exactly the same. As population grows and more septic systems are brought online, I guess we could call it online, but because our goal a lot of times is to connect septic systems to a municipal sewer system instead. And what we're acknowledging is that while in the grand scheme of things, this is not helping us move towards that federal planning target for nitrogen, we are doing a really good job of controlling total load that's coming from that sector. And ultimately, what we're responsible for is getting that total amount of nitrogen below the target. The sectors are important about how much we're releasing from ag, how much from the developed sector, from septic, because we want to fairly share that burden across all those sectors. But ultimately, septic sector is not where we're going to make a huge change in our nitrogen loading. Next slide, please. So I've got just a few examples here. These are kind of snapshots of what we've been doing. And again, this is the type of like pilot work and different programs that we're doing outside of our existing local septic implementation programs like you just heard about. These were some additional efforts from our federal grants to get some work done on the ground. We work with BDH a lot, we work with planning district commissions a lot. To target where we're seeing the most load, the septic system is not strictly limited to the Rappahannock Basin, and then also where there is a financial need, which was also mentioned as well. And you can see these are pretty small dollar amounts. You know, septic work is not particularly expensive in the grand scheme of the work that we do. You can get a lot of pump out and a lot of fixes done for this amount of money, but it's also not going to move the needle a ton on the nitrogen loads. So we've been kind of looking at ways we can increase that work with. Next slide. With the onboarding of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funding, we're now in our third year of that particular funding source. We took a pretty significant chunk of, we had about 3.6 million the first year, 660,000 went directly to BDH to bolster their septic pump out program. In particular, they had a big wait list at that time. They had so much demand, it wasn't being met by the local program, and that they didn't have the funding to meet. We wanted to clear off that backlog, which we did pretty effectively with their work on those dollars. But then we also opened it up to our regional planning district commissions. Again, this is not limited to the Rappahannock Basin, because I want to give you a picture of what we're doing kind of across the watershed. Our planning district commissions, we've had grant relationships with for many years now, and traditionally that focus has been on at most funding one full-time position at planning district commission that's focused on informing the localities about the Bay program, about opportunities that are out there, keeping them up to speed on things. With this influx of infrastructure funding, we said, hey, if we can move you towards implementing more projects, getting more projects on the ground, we can give you additional funding. That's what we did. So you see several different PDCs in those first 2 years picked us up on that and started basically duplicating the soil and water septic pump out programs where there was additional need to be met. And that was the main focus, pump outs, but also repairs and connection to municipal sewer systems. Next slide, please. Where we are sitting now, looking forward, we still have essentially 3 years to go on that 5-year infrastructure grant. The first 2 years of funding are pretty much out the door for those projects that I mentioned. We are working on getting year 3 funding out the door, and we're also working on the year 4 agreement with EPA to get that funding and getting an additional $3.5 million a year. It's wild to say, but in the grand scheme of what the state of Virginia has been approving for the ag cost share program, with over $200 million in a given year right now. It's kind of a drop in the bucket, but this is additional federal dollars that allows us to really target some areas that are kind of getting overshadowed by that big state funding. So what we're looking at now is continuing that expansion with planning district commissions, getting them more involved on the septic side and other BMP types, and then also opening up to watershed roundtables that want to pursue funding opportunities and again do this kind of work. And so we're seeing a lot of interest there, and we're just kind of starting to firm up those ideas now. It's not strictly limited to septic work, but it definitely will include certain of that. Next slide. And then here's kind of the big overview slide of everything else that we're working on in this arena right now. What you'll see is within the infrastructure dollars that we got, there was an initial set of MEBs that were designated by indicators or most effective. You might be familiar with that terminology already from previous federal grants. This one was a little different, and I know that again, we're not looking at a huge portion of the watershed included here, but initially what EPA gave us was half the eastern shore, the Potomac side of the northern neck, and a little slice of the Shenandoah Valley. And I said, those are the only places you can spend these infrastructure dollars. That was for a number of reasons. They were looking at how effective those areas were at reducing nitrogen into the bay itself, where there were disadvantaged communities and needed that funding. But based on the calculus they used, it meant that almost all of Maryland and Pennsylvania fell into most effective basin areas and could use that funding almost anywhere where we had these little slivers where we had already injected a lot of money. Went through a year-long process with EPA and said, hey, this, we can't get this much money on the ground in these limited areas. We want to make sure we're targeting larger sets of watersheds. So we got significant portions of the lower Rappahannock included, which was a huge win, and then almost basically the entire Shenandoah Valley. And what we're doing now is moving forward with those efforts. I should mention, we also, VCAP was brought up in the last presentation. We're also injecting some additional funding to VCAP. That's the residential stormwater residential scale program, seeing if they want to pursue some other type of practices beyond what they traditionally do, and then also offering a lot of training and certification for folks that work for soil and water conservation districts and other partners to become familiar with that program. And then this one tiny bullet here at the bottom, maybe I should have probably put this in much bigger text here at the bottom. This is very timely. This paper outcomes mentioned here, this just went public today. So it's on our website now. This is $20 million that was appropriated by the General Assembly in the last session, specifically for innovative, non-point source nutrient reduction projects. So it's an RFA, $20 million total. You can apply for anywhere from $100,000 to $7.5 million for a single project. It's open to NGOs, businesses, academic institutions, government partners, to come up with additional ways to tackle this, kind of complex problem. How can we continue to reduce, in particular, our nitrogen loads? And what this one is really looking at, the reason it is called paper outcomes, is how can we do it most cost effectively? So these applications are going to be based on not just, hey, I want to do this project, hey, I want to do X number of projects. It's going to be, we're doing this project, and it's going to cost this many dollars per pound of nitrogen to reduce. And they're looking for really kind of innovative ways to do that more cost effectively than we've been doing with some of our other projects. So that's a lot of money up for grabs, with the idea that both here in Virginia and across the whole big watershed, we can kind of start to experiment a little bit more with what's really going to work, target the need in a given area, and do it a little more cost effectively than we might do it. It's not to say that the projects we do aren't cost effective, or that they're not worth doing, but we're seeing this continuing need to accelerate the work we're doing, and that might be a way to do it. So, next slide. And then just one more set of examples here. I can't keep myself from straying away from just the septic topic because we do so much different stuff. I mentioned how we're putting infrastructure funding towards our planning district commissions, and I wanted to give, again, just a snapshot of the array of types of projects that those groups are doing. And these are groups that do not traditionally do implementation of projects on their own. They may support their locality or provide information so others can do that. They are really actively pursuing these projects now that range from, Hampton Roads PDC, they own their own building where they're headquartered. They're tearing out the entire parking lot, all the islands in the parking lot, doing a whole permeable paver installation for fire retention basins, educational signage, EV charger stations. Not all of that is covered with this grant. We're doing the permeable pavers and the fire retention, but to make it a showcase for all of their elected officials down there that come for their meetings, and they can say, hey, here's the type of thing we can be doing on public buildings or residential buildings, kind of show that off. And of course, I know you've heard about the Plant Flood program, where Louis Lawrence kind of spearheads down on the peninsula. That was one where they said, hey, we have a list a mile long of projects we want to do, and if you give us funding for it, boom, we're going to get them done. So they're doing a whole bunch of living shorelines and other shoreline stabilization projects down there. Glad to be able to do it. Some had existing septic programs, that we were just able to inject some more funding into and ramp up the number of pump outs they're doing, all kind of moving us in that same direction of reducing the total amount of nitrogen and phosphorus. Next slide. And then one thing I always want to plug, and then I'll wrap it up. We do also have a state land WIP. This is a portion of our WIP 3 that was created under the last administration to say, basically, hey, we as state agencies, we as the state of Virginia, we're always asking localities and residents and other folks to, do their part, do these projects, ag producers in particular, to pursue these EMPs. we should be doing the same thing. The state of Virginia owns a lot of land, and we can be doing this kind of work there as well. So it's been a relatively small amount of money, 1.5 million between federal and state sources. But again, these are ones that are meant to be kind of showcase projects where they're on state lands, usually publicly accessible. I really want to shout out the Department of Corrections and their State Farm project that the State Farm prison straddles the James River and Goochland Powhatan counties. They've done extensive livestock stream exclusion, fencing, riparian forest buffers along the land that they own. And they've also turned that into a training and certification program for folks who are incarcerated there to learn how to do that, become certified pesticide applicators, all these different things. It's this really cool program where they've got a ton of folks involved with the work that's going on there. And then we've got a really cool, here a little closer to where we are, Lake Anna State Park is doing this big tree planting project and the revitalization of their main parking lot in each area with some of our funds. So I'll just glad to see that. Next slide, please. And I'll leave it at that. I'll leave you with a beautiful view of the Chesapeake Bay. My contact information is up there and happy to take questions while I'm here.
Thank you, Kevin. Any questions?
Okay. If I'm reading this correctly, the goals by 2025 for the nitrogen should be at the level that the feds are expecting. If we don't meet that, I mean, because it looks like we've got a ways to go.
Right.
What is our penalties? What's coming?
So I'll say three different things to that. The first is with those historic investments that we're seeing in the ag program, what we're seeing in specifically in the ag sector for nitrogen, there's a little bit of a lag between when the funding gets approved, projects get implemented, and we start to see the real impact of watershed. But we are starting to see nitrogen drop incrementally with those investments over the last couple of years. Depending on who you ask, whether it's James Martin, who heads up the VAX program, Matt Wells, who heads up DCR, or the governor himself, they will tell you by 2028, we're meeting that goal. By 2027, we're meeting that goal. By 2026, we're meeting that goal. I've heard them say all of those publicly. That's the first answer, is we are making strides. Second answer is, you're right, we probably are not going to meet that goal by the end of 2025, as is the case for every jurisdiction in the Bay watershed except for Washington, D.C. And we have acknowledged that publicly. Well, that's part of the Beyond 2025 process I mentioned. There is not going to be a federal hammer that comes down on January 1st of 2026, to say you didn't meet your goal, and here's what you have to do now. If you're tracking it, there has been some public statements by EPA that we may take a stronger leadership role. We may, step in to kind of help guide the jurisdictions to get to that goal faster, but it's not going to be a absolute crackdown on that. And the final thing I'll say is that the state of Virginia also approved. It's colloquially called the Bay Backstop Bill, basically to say that if the ag sector doesn't achieve their goals by 2025, these projects are going to become managed. That was changed 2027 and then 2028. So, friend up here. The state of Virginia is also recognizing we are not going to essentially punish the ag sector because collectively we didn't meet the goal by 2025, but we do want to keep the pressure on to get us there sooner rather than later. That was a very long answer to a good question. Yeah.
Are there programs to assist in the funding of any upgrades for wastewater treatment plants and or industrial pretreatment?
Absolutely. So I didn't focus on that too much, but wastewater has been our best success of the nitrogen side. We've made the most progress in that sector in particular. Most of the larger wastewater facilities are now considered state of the art in terms of their reduction of nitrogen and phosphorus and sediment going through their systems. There is also, and I didn't highlight it here, but there is also a pilot program right now for point source pay for outcomes versus the non-point source pay for outcomes that I highlighted. That was only $1 million because what they're essentially trying to do is to get just a few wastewater treatment plants to demonstrate that with X number of dollars, they can increase their efficiency by whatever percentage. Because the expectation at this point is we've made huge strides with wastewater facilities, and anything more that we do is going to get incrementally more expensive because we've already kind of pushed it to the limit of what we can do in a good way. And we're kind of now testing like, how expensive is it gonna get to try to get even more reductions out of the wastewater center? There is not an expectation that the wastewater sector will have to achieve any more reductions. It's more of a, if they want to participate in a program like this to achieve it. They've already done, as far as the program is concerned, as far as the WIP is concerned, they've already done their share of the lifting, if that makes sense.
Any other questions?
Just one quick, what is the grant programs for wastewater?
What is
Can I just contact you to get more?
You can absolutely contact me. There's a number of different funding sources that go into the wastewater sector at DEQ, but I can connect you with the right folks who can.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Right, thank you.
With that, that's the end of our agenda. Future meeting dates listed there. We'll be at our middle meeting ground in December at the Meadow Event Park. And then, Caroline County in the spring, down in my neck of the woods in Middlesex County, in June, and then, back up this way in Culpeper in 2025. Future topics, we've identified, a couple there. Are there any other things that we want to bring before the commission's attention?
I don't have anything for the commission to take that. I just want to see if there's any projected legislation for the session.
That's a great question, and our December meeting was originally intended to do that, but your bosses at the assembly keep pushing that date farther ahead, and we're not. I don't have anything at this point. I really don't. I think that we do want to hear from Terry and what's going on in BDOF that we'll talk about in December. But I gotta kind of related to your question. Does the commission want a follow-up from Dwayne Roadcap on the Rapidan situation? Since additional documents will be created by then and recommendations to kind of follow up, what are those, and there may be some things there, I don't know.
I would agree, but on the water supply planning, I'd like to go a little deeper, especially with the localities.
I want to talk about water supply, make that a kind of our last thing. I want to talk about what we're going to do between now and the next meeting, what the technical committee is going to be doing. But I think Tom was trying to get started.
No. All that I was going to say is one thing you still need to do with the executive committee. Doesn't have to represent certain information.
Thank you, Tom. All right, point he was making, Tom is the Upper Basin representative on the executive committee, the committee that rarely meets, which is a good thing. But we do need a representative from the Upper Basin to take Tom's place on the executive committee.
What's considered the Upper Basin?
Your Middle Basin. Your Middle Basin.
It would be up here.
Oh, this is up.
Yeah, this is, so it's basically this planning district.
Well, hello, you're up.
If it rarely meets.
If it rarely meets, we have about there.
We haven't had to hold a meeting of the executive committee in at least 5
You can
years.
always assign it to somebody that's not here.
She'll do it. I had a question. No, sorry.
Thank
You got quick question.
We'll have a formal vote to appoint you to the executive committee. All those in favor of
Aye.
appointing Debbie to the.
Debbie Donahue.
Moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Did you want to do it? That's my.
Senator Grant.
I had a question. So, earlier in some of the prior meetings, we talked about the water in the Rappahannock and the data centers and all that. And we were gonna do a deep dive. I wanted to make sure that was coming back on the agenda at some point in time.
That's kind of what Kathy was asking.
That's where I was actually going.
In a different way.
Well,
I think that relates to item B here.
Yes,
remember I brought it up.
that, let me kind of do two things together. One, we've now, last year, this time, the commission members asked us to bring a series of presentations forward on septic. We've now been through septic discussions that really cover the whole basin over the past year. The wrap up of that was, and these are gonna be my words, not DEQ's words, Kevin. When you look at it in terms of the bait program, septic is very small, and I'm going to get back to the water, but I need to wrap up this discussion. It's small, but for the individual homeowner, it isn't small. And I think one of the lessons we take in listening, thinking back about the three different presentations, I think that's important to remember. If we're talking about Chesapeake Bait Program, yes, the resources need to go into the other where we can really make up what's left in closing the gap. Okay. But we need robust septic programs, much like we have in this district. All right. Now, I'm going to interpret one of your slides, and you tell me if I'm interpreting it wrong. Where the federal money was going to go, and then you had to fight back, and you got a larger geography. Where is it not going? Right here. And why is that? It's punishment for the great job this district does on septic. Is that a fair?
I don't think that that's an accurate reason why they were focused solely on which watersheds were having the most impact on nitrogen emissions. So because we were
You're just reversing the way I'm saying it. Because of decades of work on the septic program here, there's been a positive impact here that you haven't seen in some other parts of the state that haven't been as aggressive. Okay. So if you want to look to a model of well done in terms of dealing with those individual problems, it's look here. We heard that in 2018 when we had a presentation. We heard that 5 years earlier when we had a presentation. And I've talked about this. This district really stands out. And so if you want to be looking on that small scale, you and I can debate how we interpret that.
No, I think you're right. And I'm trying to be kind since EPA, but that was essentially the basis of our argument across all the jurisdictions was Virginia's getting the short end of this funding because we've done a really good job compared to some of the states further up Washington. Yeah.
So I would say,
I probably shouldn't chime in here, but I will a little bit because I started with solar
Wait.
water in 2015. And
Yeah.
that is used for agricultural B&E funding is very complex. But one of the factors is how many B&Es have been completed. And there's a little bit of an assumption in that equation on the ag funding, at least, that more practice is done, there's less to do. So I feel like I've seen that same kind of theme there. I don't think it's, I think there's a lot of factors that go into it, so it may not.
Not just septic, it's also ag and other things where you've done well.
Right. So with the ag model specifically, at the front of the manual,
What?
there's a formula that plays into.
They should be.
Cost share calculation, and that is one of the factors that goes into that complicated part.
Somebody online said something.
Senator, do you have a comment?
all right, my point was, I think we've wrapped up that conversation the commission asked for. And
I apologize.
Go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I was fumbling, little technical difficulties. I just wanted to, it's a little tough for me to hear. So if this has been answered, please forgive me. But I know that we voted to have the executive committee meet. I think Eldon, you said for the first time in 5 years. Is that right?
The executive committee was created early on by the commission in case there was some urgent decision that needed to be made in between commission meetings, such as an unexpected grant opportunity that was right at our work plan. And it gave the ability because I'm precluded, I cannot apply for any grant that I'm not authorized by the commission, by those bylaws. And This gave an out that if something came up, because that did happen a couple times in the past, and then it had to be ratified by the full commission. We haven't had a circumstance that required the executive committee to meet in about 5 years. That's why I made that statement.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Okay. Back to the point I was trying to make on the septic. I think for me, what I've heard, if the commission needs additional information on septic, we can schedule that, we can have more discussion. But the issue is one of how are we looking at it? If we're looking at it the way Louis Lawrence in the Middle Peninsula looks at it, I've got to help solve problems for individual property owners. And that's the way this district looks at it. That's one issue. And for those individual property owners, it's a big deal. If we're looking at it from Kevin's perspective on the bait program, it's not the best place to put the most resources to get where we want to go. Okay, there's the conclusion. Now to water supply. And we've been trying to get to water supply, but we needed to deal with the other topic that was assigned to the technical committee and us last year. The water supply planning regs were held up. The regional water supply planning regs, the new ones, were held up in the governor's office for almost a year. They weren't released and publicized until September 9th. October 9th, they become official. That is the beginning date of when everybody here, every local government here has 5 years to complete your new regional water supply plan in the regions as specified by code and by the regulations. I've been trying to get the presentation that we're going to have December, but DEQ couldn't make that presentation till the governor's office released the regs and they were made final. And that's another reason why it's taken so long to get to this discussion. We need to hear that presentation so we can go deeper into what that means for everybody here and for all your constituents. Starting next week, the technical committee is going to start a discussion of, okay, what are those deeper topics that we need to be prepared to talk about, that we need to talk with you about. We'll have some of that for you in December, but it's really also going to be, after you hear that presentation, what is it that you want to know more about? And then we move into that phase of the discussion. And it's been a little bit difficult because the technical committee, I know you've been wanting to get there, but until those regs were released, we had draft regs. They're still draft regs. You can't take action on draft regs because they can change. By December, each locality will have to notify DEQ, I can't remember the date, maybe it's the 12th or something like that, who their chief point of contact is for their role within the regional plan. So things are going to start happening once we get to that official date of October 9th, 30 days after September 9th, when the regs were published. You're going to start getting communications about it. And that's what Whedon Clow, or his name is William, but he goes by, I think his middle name is Whedon. Whedon Clow will be in front of you in December to talk about. And we may have supplemental stuff, but we've already got 2 other presentations. The SWIFT program, which was again something the commission asked to hear more about. It's taken us this long to get their director in front of you. He actually had wanted to come to this meeting and then he asked to switch it back to December, which I can understand because coming from Norfolk to here and coming from Norfolk to Meadowland Park is very different. So that's the plan going forward. If that sounds right to everybody. If we've got it wrong, please tell me. And technical committee is going to be talking about this next Wednesday.
Seems like a quick turnaround. Publishing to implementation.
That's the way the process works. It takes a long time to get to that date, and then it's 30 days where it's publicized, and then it's not official until the end of the 30 days. Like, am I reading book people here that I get that?
Elder, though, this, to make sure the data center part is very vital, especially in our region. And
Thanks.
so that's,
I left something out. December 9th,
mhm,
5 days after our meeting in December, not before. JLARC is producing their data center report,
okay,
which is supposed to cover a range of aspects relative to data centers, including water. We're probably gonna want, and JLARC is not gonna release a draft before the night. You don't get JLARC reports until they present the report to the commission and it is accepted by the commission. So even though it's 5 days before, we're not gonna get any advance notice. But we may ask JLARC to present at our meeting in March to talk about the water aspects of their study. It may be of value, but I think there's too much deep work that's being done by JLARC on the broad range data center issue to get too far ahead of it. Because when they come out with their report, their reports are thorough and respected by the members of the assembly, as our assembly members here can tell you. Probably more JLARC recommendations become law than from any other commission associated with the General Assembly. And sometimes it takes 10 years. But, well, you take the K through 12 study of a couple of years ago, it's going to take 10 years. Some of those are significant changes, like rewriting the composite index. Okay, something that's very important to that. Okay, Kathy, yes, data center is definitely part of it, but I think we don't want to get too far ahead of that informed.
and I throw it in because we're on a clock, and so that's why I have to ask, because our clock, we have a 10-year clock and then a 14-year clock to go to alternative water sources, and our only source is the Rappahannock River, so.
And all that's wrapped together.
Yeah, I know, but I have to advocate, so.
Yeah, no, that.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chip, I saw you waiting.
No, I'll just throw out for the local jurisdictions who may have some specific questions about water supply planning, because it is a quick turnaround. And in your cases, sometimes you're gonna have 3 or 4 counties who have to decide who that one representative is gonna be, and not all counties tend to agree on things sometimes. You can go to your planning district commissions. They have been on top of this for the smaller, more immediate questions you may have. Go to your PDCs. I bet you they can help answer those.
Anyone else on that topic, Kelvin?
No.
Any other important things the commission should look at in the coming months? Seeing none, I see we got to the end of our agenda. No objection, we will stand adjourned. Adjourned, thank you.